way we kind of met was I was on Tim's show IRL talking, and you were on a drive to go film the Dogman documentary, right?
Yeah.
Down,
Yeah.
I think you're going to Kentucky,
Lucky. Yep.
and as you tuned in, I'm there talking about this woman I talked to opening up a portal where she saw a beast come through, and you're like, what? And then we kind of connected soon after that, and it's like, these. I think if people are paying attention to their surroundings, they see that God's opening these doors and being like, "Yo, you got to like pay attention to this,"
Yeah.
and it's amazing. I think it's very relatable to people, especially about I accepted Christ a year ago. I got baptized this month a year ago, and it amazing joy, and see my kids and all the happiness and joy and like this blueprint that we have now through this life of chaos and suffering. On top of all that, it's also been we've been inundated with evil. This has probably been no, most definitely been one of the hardest years of my life, from invading evil forces constantly. And I think about that too. Like you're saying, oh, I'm just a podcaster talking about this stuff, and am I just in this world? That's all I see. But I think it's like unavoidable now, because we might have it personally happening to us, but people are watching the world stage collapse under spiritual warfare. They might not define it like that, but in 1 week we have a current president dropping out, and last week, in the same week, we had the former president survive an assassination attempt. These are strange and unhinged dark times. I think it's really hard for people to overlook this, which is why I'm saying earlier, I'm seeing a lot of people being like, this is something much darker, much bigger. But it is interesting how, once you accept Christ, the evil finds you. Like, it's nonstop.
But it's because you chose a side. You chose a team. You're not a threat when you're neutral. When you're on the bench, you're not playing in the game. You're not a threat. Nobody's going to guard you. Once you get off that bench, you check in, and you're actually putting effort into the game.
Yeah.
It's time to guard you. It's time to put the offensive on you. And
so,
I mean, it's really pretty simple once you start understanding things the way you and I do.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be a little nerve-wracking. I'll be honest with you, it can be a little nerve-wracking because there's the human element of it as well, where, listen, I'm East Coast, originally from Philadelphia area. Like, I'm not the cutesy soft pillow guy. Like, I'm rough around the edges. I don't like nonsense, and I grew up in the 90s, man. Like, I grew up with real face-to-face interaction with people. So when this crap happens and it's all, lobbying threats towards me and stuff online, you get a little hot-headed, you get frustrated, you get angry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard at times to keep your mind right about it all.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard not to get jaded by it and just be like, what's the point of this?
Mm-hmm.
And you want to throw it up in the air and be like, I'm done with this crap. But then at the end of the day, it's like, well, that's admitting defeat then, And so I can't do that. And I recently have been, I've been really kind of fighting a lot of that stuff and the anger,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of landed on, and I don't know if this is inverted world or not. I'm sorry. I'll say this last part and we can go wherever. But I did land on Ephesians 4 recently, and it was very random that I opened it up and started reading that.
Yep.
And it starts talking about later in the chapter, it starts talking about like not letting anger control you because Satan will use that as a tool against you. And that's when I was like, oh, shoot.
Yeah. Needed to see that.
That's even spiritual warfare. Literally, that's even spiritual warfare. Giving him the tools to cut your own neck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is part of the inverted world, because the Bible has become the anchor for me to get through the inverted world, right? Like I have a way to define these things. Like I was saying earlier, I used to think of aliens as just aliens, but now the way I've shifted my views, and I've seen demons. I believe I've seen demons, whether they're in politics, and I'm saying in person. I've seen politicians who I believe are demonic, but I've also seen just run-of-the-mill demons in small towns in Ohio, right? Like now I'm like, and I'm not just saying that because now I believe in Christ. Like I'm saying that because I'm like, that is pure evil. These people are pure evil. They can harm the innocence of children. There's no other way for me to put it other than that's demonic, right? And now, it's you can't unsee that. There's no going back, at least not for me. Now that I've seen that, being like, there's got to be on the flip side, there is that good, and that good, I'm also positive. I'm very hopeful that good is going to win in the end. I just don't know how much of this darkness we're going to have to see. And I'm also thinking in terms of positive thinking that we are perhaps on a revival path right now. Like I'm saying, with people waking up, whether it was watching a miracle on live TV or something happening in their own lives, or just the past 4 years have people watched the world shut down. People need something bigger than themselves. We got to break the shackles of materialism and give it up to God. Be like, this is something much bigger than me. And you know, that gives me the confidence to get through the things that we talk about, like the demons, you know, that we see in this world, because they're everywhere.
I agree, man. And it's like, oh well, my lights went out.
Uh-oh. There you go.
We're just talking about
there you go.
We were just talking about the demons.
Imagine if it just turned red all of a sudden.
That's literally never happened before.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I don't even remember what I was going to say now. So whatever.
We were talking about the anchor of God through the inverted world, but we can go from there. I want to hear more about, like, was it the past few months you put out the Sasquatch film?
Yeah.
Talk to us about this.
Yeah, man. What a journey that was. So again, you know, prophecy fulfilled, right? So like I said, I was driving my truck and I felt the Holy Spirit say, you're going to work with Wes Germer one day from Sasquatch Chronicles, and you're going to be a podcaster. I became a podcaster. It's what I do for my full-time job now. And not only is Wes Germer a best friend of mine, he literally, him and I did this last documentary together, literally worked together, you know? But basically his story sent shockwaves through the Bigfoot community, probably close to 12 years ago now, probably like 2011, 12. Him and his brother, Wes and his brother lost their dad, and his brother came to the house one night and they were just like, you know, let's just go out, blow steam off. It was late at night. And so they went for a ride, and they're in Washington State, and they go up the mountains, and they're going up the mountains, and his brother sees like this little road that cuts off, like an old logging road. And he just pulls just off the logging road and comes to a stop, and they're sitting there and they're kind of talking about whether they're going to go further because it's overgrown. I've been on the road, very overgrown. I would not feel comfortable taking any vehicle there because you don't know how stable the road is. So they're actually arguing back and forth as to, you know, what to do. And Wes was like, dude, let's just back up and get out of here. Woody's like, I want to test out my new 4-wheel drive. And they start hearing something or things coming in on their vehicle at this point. And I'm going to condense the story because, you know, it's probably, it was a 3-hour ordeal that Wes tells in like an hour. So I'm going to give you the condensed version of it. Yeah. But they started hearing things coming in on the vehicle, and they didn't know if they stumbled across a grow op or something and guys were coming in. But they had guns in the back seat. They got their guns. They loaded them up. And it wasn't until these things were getting closer and closer, and it wasn't until something came up behind the car. So they had just pulled off the main log road, which is still far out there, dirt, gravel road. But something came in on behind it, and he said they heard a growl that was so deep that it reverberated in the car, and it felt like it was sitting in the back seat, essentially. And so freaked them out. They don't know what the heck this is. They back out of this little spot, and they get out on the road, and they come to a stop because Woody just needed to take a break. He's like, dude, I don't know what the heck's going on, but I just need a second to calm down. And when they're sitting there, they see something up in a tree, and they're looking at it, and this thing's like sit in a tree, and it's kind of peeking behind a tree and going back and forth. And Wes describes it as if it looked like a crackhead moving back and forth, real skippy. And then this just giant behemoth of a monster walks out onto the road in front of them, strutting almost like it's challenging them. And there were several that night that had come out, and they did things that up to this point people never even really heard of, at least talked about openly. And Wes and his brother, they weren't even thinking Bigfoot when they were looking at these things. They're like, these are monsters. Like, we don't know what they are. And when they came out and started telling their story, they started telling people how this one dropped down to all four and pumped its butt up in the air like it was going to run. Right there, it was like he said it was like a runner, and people are like, that's bull crap, that's crazy and stuff. But then he also talks about how they would move on all four. And it's not people like Is it a stretch to say Bigfoot could walk on all four? I don't think so, but it wasn't commonly talked about, from what I understand. It's before my time in this world. But that's not the part that tripped people out. The part that tripped people out is how he said that it was on all four and used its fingers and toes to crawl across the road, not its arms. It literally supported itself and did that across the road. And like I said, this was like a 3-hour ordeal, and we wanted to go investigate this area. And so me and my guys went out to Washington, and thankfully Wes said he'd take us up there. He's not fond of being up there. He wouldn't go out there at night with us. Like, we went up there at night, but he wouldn't go with us at night. He said, I'll show you where it's at during the day. I'm not going up there at night. And so he shows us where it's at. We investigate during the day. We go back at night. And the first night, nothing really happened. It was kind of like a nothing burger. And like when you invest money in doing a documentary and the first night you're like, oh, this was boring. It's like, oh, shoot. Like reality started to set in, like, well, because like our process of doing these documentaries is go to areas that we know have activity, exist in those areas for extended periods of time, and let it unfold around us and see what happens. Like we're not out there like with Ouija boards, trying to tell the nation we're resigning from our presidency. So like it's just one of those things where it's not the best method to guarantee awesome results, but we believe it's the most pure method.
Oh, dude, the journey is way more important, I think, than the destination. I really do think that. So you're out there and you're not seeing anything that first day. What's the night like when you're going through there?
So like I said, the first night, boring.
Yeah.
The next day we were doing other things. I think we interviewed Joanna the next day, and she had an experience not about 30 miles distance from this spot where she came across a creature on Mount Hood in Oregon, and it stood up, it looked at her, and then it dropped down on all four, but it didn't turn around. It literally, its torso was facing upwards towards the sky. Its head still looking at her, and it walks backwards up the hill like an octopus.
Oh, dang.
And so like we wanted to have her on because she's another person in that area talking about Bigfoot moving in a way that seems supernatural, that it's not just this natural physical thing.
Right.
And it wasn't until the last night that we go up there and we're like, well, let's go up to his spot the last night and see what happens, That's when things kind of kicked off. We had when we first opened the door, we had a smell come into the RV that is often described with Sasquatch. It was like a skunky, rotty, trashy type smell, wet, And so with that comes in, we're like, okay, something's here. But before we even went outside, we had heard things inside. We heard whistles, hoots, literal knocking on the RV. Like we have it all recorded. Like we were shooting video at the time of the knocking on the RV.
Another Sasquatch thing, right? The knocking. Right. Yeah.
I don't know if it's the curiosity or what. And it was 4 knocks, I believe, because if it was 3 knocks, we would have made a big deal about it. I think it was 4 knocks. But at that same spot that this activity's happened, and we had other things happen. We had growls come in and stuff like that come in on the RV. But over this entire week of being there, we're sitting at a spot that last night that we discovered the very first day being there. There was a vehicle that was sitting there seemingly abandoned. And we walked over to this camp, and this guy had his bong sitting out, several containers of weed, like full of weed, just sitting there, like he had just was planning on coming back. And so we're just, and the guy's like, this feels weird. I'm like, he's probably going to come back for his weed, guys, Yeah. But the whole week, nothing moved. Nothing changed about it. And we had found like a brand new pair of Nikes up the hill towards ground zero where Wes had his encounter. And the last night when we went up there again and nothing had been touched again, we were like, okay, something's up here. And we did wind up reporting it to the police, and he is a missing person to this day. And what's crazy is this happened. Where he went missing was about 200 feet away from where Wes had his encounters, and it's eerie how similar things are. Wes said that if they weren't in a vehicle, he doesn't believe his brother and him would have survived that night.
Wow!
And this guy's setting up camp himself in this area, and it seems like we found his shoes away from the camp, as if like he ran out of his shoes, or maybe he was drugged somewhere. But on top of that, like we came back and we talked about this trip publicly, and somebody had heard us finding this guy, and we knew his name because there was a parking pass with his name on it. They knew him. And so they contacted his ex-fiance who contacted us, and she's like, where is he? Like, we've been looking for him. We're like, well, we don't know where he is. This is where his stuff is. And I talked to her, and she kind of said, I don't care if, you know, somebody got him, if he killed himself, or if Bigfoot got him. I just need to know what happened to him. So months goes by, and, you know, we don't hear much about, you know, his case other than he went missing in that location. And the police, I reached out to her and I asked her any updates, and she said the police searched that entire area and they didn't find John, but they found 4 other dead bodies in that area. And so, like, at the time of us walking around there looking for Bigfoot, we could have stumbled across a dead body. Wow. And what's really weird is what I perceive as almost like a brush under the carpet, a convenient reason, excuse, cover up that the police are doing right now. Because about a week before, I think it was about a week or a month before we came out with the documentary, the police said on their Facebook page, the sheriff's department said that up in the Sunset Falls area, this is where it happened at, there was a biker who discovered, I guess, off trail, a human skull. And they said that they went up there a day or two later because the snow up there gets crazy. So you can't always just get right up there.
Right.
But when they got up there, they retrieved the human skull and other body parts. And they said they suspected to be John Guffey. The problem with that is they searched this entire area and they found 4 other dead bodies, but none of them was his. And now you're telling me in that same area, John just magically appears off a trail where a biker was biking. And these trails aren't like wilderness trails. They're like paved trails that they're biking on. So, like, I personally don't feel like it's John Guffey, but I think it was a convenient thing to say, oh, well, that's a one missing person case solved.
Case closed.
Yeah, but from what I understand, the local law enforcement understand what's going on up there as far as there being alternative explanations as to the missing people.
Did you find out what state the bodies were in that they found, like the 4 bodies? Were they skeletal remains? Were they something, like, do you know anything about them?
I don't know anything about it. All she told me is that they found 4 missing four dead bodies, and none of them were John's.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, and so, I mean, like, that's where the title of the thing comes from, Sasquatch and the Missing Man. It was just like, this is the result of putting yourself in an environment and just letting it unfold around you. You never know what you're going to get. We went out there looking for Bigfoot, and we wound up finding not Bigfoot, but a missing person case. So it's like a true crime paranormal documentary.
Incredible.
And I call these adventure documentaries because it's not like we're spending tons of time sitting down and interviewing one person after another and doing transitions between people telling us their thoughts. Like, it's us talking to people who've had encounters and then going out there and looking for monsters. And I mean, I have fun doing it. So
I love it. I love it. When you say ex-fiance, did this guy go missing while they were engaged, or was it like an ex-fiance and then?
I think it was an ex-fiance, and then they were still friends, kind of thing.
Okay.
So it seemed like he was pretty much a big time loner. Like, he originated from Maryland, and it tells you the state of the person's thought process. At least he went from Baltimore area, or at least Maryland, all the way out to Washington. And from what I remember, she said he had like $1,200 on him, and he had this idea that he was going to live off grid. And it's like, you're going to live off grid, out of a van in Washington with $1,200? Like,
right. It's like that movie. It's like the book where the guy dies in the van. What's that movie?
Into the Wild.
Into the Wild, yeah. But with Sasquatch, or serial killer, or maybe Sasquatch is a serial killer. Is that a theory?
Hey,
sounds about right. Maybe.
Hey, listen, if you want to say that Sasquatch kills people, then it probably is a serial killer.
I mean, it sounds like something's going on there.